Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to begin our first day on Unit 7.7, and this is Conducting World War II. Today we're really just going to take a kind of a macro look at World War II, and just kind of look at some of the big picture stuff, and then on our second day we'll look at a couple of specific, do a couple of case study things. So what we're really looking for today, and today's a good day to kind of do this, is to be looking for similarities and differences in how governments use a variety of methods to conduct the war. All right, so, and of course, if you want some kind of illustrative examples, all right, total war, ways in which mobilization takes place, and the way that totalitarians mobilize for war, but also how they, what waging of total war looks like. And that's what we're going to get today. There's I'd like to kind of start off today with a more modern meme, right? It's a newer meme. But I really like this one just because I think it actually works pretty well. So if you're familiar with World War II, this is going to make sense. And if you're not familiar, then hopefully it will after today. All right. So this is, a kind of a very famous radio broadcast, given by Winston Churchill in the middle of the Blitz, or the Battle of Britain, right? So we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills, and we shall never surrender. All right, so, and I like this little fact check, because I think it applies pretty well to how fact checks are. I would like to meet the person, who objectively would have thought that Churchill wasn't wrong for saying what he was saying. From an objective point of view, it really did not look like England would have had any chance of making out of its situation that it was in, and Germany was undoubtedly projected to be able to defeat them at that particular point. So I like this one a lot. It does kind of show you some of the issues with these kinds of tactics. All right, so if you're not familiar with that little moment, let's kind of just do a quick little way of doing this. And I like this a lot. Just kind of make sure. So when we start talking about World War II, right? We generally kind of look at, when does World War II start? If you're talking about the Pacific theater, we've already talked about 1931, right? The invasion of Manchuria by the Japanese, or northern China by the Japanese. If you don't want to use that as a start of World War II, then undoubtedly 1937, right? Being when the Japanese launched their full-scale invasion against China. All right, so there's no doubt that World War II has begun in the Pacific in 1937. In the European theater, because this is a multi-theater war, World War II will begin, specifically on September 1st, 1939, with the Nazi invasion of Poland. All right, so specifically September 1st, 1939, that's when it begins. And that is also, in reaction to that invasion, right? So in this, there's some words that come out of this time, blitzkrieg is the, or lightning war, right, is how this is often described. In response to this, England and France will declare war on Nazi Germany. Okay, so World War II begins with that moment. Now, that being said, rewind about a month and a half beforehand, and we have the signing of a treaty between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, sometimes referred to as the Nazi-Soviet Pact, sometimes referred to as the Hitler-Stalin Pact. So when, obviously Hitler knew that the invasion of Poland was going to happen, but did not want to deal with the Soviet Union, right? Did not want to go to war against Stalin at this time. So the two powers signed an agreement, a non-aggression pact, that when the war does happen, that the Soviet Union would basically get back its land that it had lost back in with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and did not get back as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. So these countries that were created by Versailles, your Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, they're simply going to Finland. They're simply going to be conquered and taken over by the Soviet Union. So you don't really ever talk very much about this side of 1939, and what the Soviets, get out of this. But this does happen. But the World War II begins. Once World War II is declared, right? Once England and France have declared war, the aggression of the Nazis goes beyond into Denmark and up into Norway, goes beyond what is, a land claim from land loss from the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, we see the attack of the Benelux countries. So many of you have seen the film Dunkirk, right, depicting the Nazis pushing the British soldiers into the sea, right? So, and then by June of 1940, so less than a year, right? But by the time this thing even starts, France falls, right? So by June of 1940, France falls. We see the establishment of the Vichy regime. So this is the kind of Nazi puppet government, and then once France falls, then we see, they turn their attention to Southeast Europe. So the Balkans, right? Balkans. The Balkans will get conquered, and then Italy jumps in and takes over Greece. Okay, so by this point, by June, the mainland of the continental Europe is largely gone. We see an empire very similar to the one that had been created by Napoleon. Okay, and then at this point, we see them turning their attention to the British, right? So where we're now using the Luftwaffe, and the aerial bombardment, or the Blitz, or sometimes referred to as the Battle of Britain, will now commence, and we're going to see the wide-scale bombing of the urban population center of England. Okay, so at this point, this is kind of go back to that speech we just looked at with Winston Churchill. Right at this point, what chance does England have at defending itself against Nazi Germany? Europe, France has fallen. Soviets are not in the fight at all. The United States, has, congressionally, we can't even give weapons, to them. We are legally bound by our own Congress to stay out of the war, right? And so what chance does England really have at this particular point, right? So the Blitz will last, the better part of a year, right? And then a year after it begins, decisions are made to turn their attention to the east and violate the Hitler-Stalin non-aggression treaty. So in June of 1941, we see Operation Barbarossa go into play, and the full-scale invasion of the Soviet Union. Okay, obviously this will take the pressure off from England, right, and buy some time for them, right? So why does Hitler do this? Right? Why does Hitler do this? I've heard two kind of theories on this. The first theory I don't put a lot of credence in, but I'm sure there is a level of truth to this. So the first one is this whole Hitler is a megalomaniac, and having conquered Europe, similar to what Napoleon did. If you wanted to be remembered in history as greater than Napoleon, then he had to outdo Napoleon, which means he needed to be able to do what Napoleon failed to do, and that is conquer Russia. Right. So, there is some evidence to support this assertion. The evidence being that that Operation Barbarossa, the day that the operation was launched, was the exact same day that Napoleon launched his invasion of Russia. So there's probably some truth to this. However, trying to get all of your military planners and other people who you need to support you. Hitler is an autocrat and all, but you do need buy-in from your from your soldiers, right, from your military class. That's probably probably not going to get full support. The other kind of theory on this, if you look on the website that you're watching this on right now, you'll see the John Green video about resources. World War II being a war for resources. I think that is a much better explanation. And I will say that it is probably one of the least entertaining of crash courses that I've ever seen. However, it is really rich in evidence, right? So anyway, the basic gist of what John Green goes over with this theory is, in order for the Reich to be self-sufficient, it needed to be able to feed itself, right? And taking over the Ukraine, what is the Ukraine? Sometimes referred to as the breadbasket of Europe, will then make it self-sufficient, no longer needing to import grain from places like Russia or the United States, right? So food independence, food autonomy, food self-sufficiency. And then, of course, if you continue east into, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, into the oil fields of southern Russia, then you'll no longer need to be importing oil as well. All right. So this resource self-sufficiency, I think is a much better reason why he does this. Okay. All right. So this is the war has broken out and started at this point, and the only major player not truly involved at this point will be the United States, and we will get involved on December 7th, 1941. So about 6 months after Operation Barbarossa takes place, and the Soviets get involved. Right, and we'll talk more specifically about that, about the U.S. entrance next week. So in class, and what I would recommend you do is in class we watch this, this kind of data-driven documentary. And you'll see a link to it on my site you're watching this video on. Right, and I think it's very well done. Gives you a nice macro view of World War II. We don't typically cover all the major battles of events and stuff like that, but World War II is a very significant war. I mean, it's a war that resulted in more deaths than any other war in all of history, but it's also a major turning point war. And the way the world was before World War II is not going to be the same world that leaves World War II. And obviously the story for the United States will change, right, as a result of this. So I think it is important to kind of run through a more macro coverage of World War II, and just at least see, the major battles and their impact. And I think this is a pretty powerful 20 minutes. So please watch this. I tell students in class that I am known to give open note quiz questions about this, nothing too crazy specific, but things like, what is the single largest battle in the European theater in World War II, stuff like that. What is which battles did the United States lose the most, soldiers in the Eastern, in the Pacific Front or in the European theater, questions like that, right? So I would highly encourage you to watch it and take notes. Because you're probably going to have an open note quiz on this stuff next week, or at least I'll pull a couple questions from this. Okay. All right. So I do also kind of pause a few times and just kind of point out things, just kind of tell you now what it is. So when it gets to the kind of urban bombing portion of it, when it's talking about the civilian casualties in the European theater, one of the things you're being asked to do is look for similarities and differences in how governments used a variety of methods to conduct the war. And when you start talking about the urban bombings, this is one key similarity that we see used amongst all the major combatants. So obviously the Blitz or Battle of Britain, you're going to see the Nazis intentionally targeting civilian population centers. And of course you are also going to see the United States and Britain using similar tactics with the fire bombings of cities like Hamburg and Dresden, or the Americans of firebombing of Tokyo, right? Tokyo. All right. So look for similarities in these kinds of tactics like that specifically. Okay. All right. So, right. Once you are done watching that, we're largely done for the day. All right. So just, after watching this, this is going to make a lot more sense. So, like, for example, if you ask who won World War I, if you ask who gives the most blood and gold for World War I, then the Soviet Union, right? So the lowball estimates on civilians and soldiers killed in World War II, the lowball estimate is 20 million or 25 million or so. A more realistic number is between 30 to 40 million killed in the Soviet Union. All right, so if you ask who won World War II as far as who comes out in the strongest position, obviously the United States, right? This is a very clear answer. Our country does not suffer invasion in any way, with the exception of Pearl Harbor. But even most of those ships are going to be brought back into commission by the time the war is done, right? So we end, when you look at GDP, right, our GDP doubles. And we become the world creditor. The dollar becomes the standard currency on the planet. We are producing half of the manufacturing on planet Earth. I mean, it's a shocking statistic, right? From as far as international military bases, we had a little bit of a footprint before World War II because of the Spanish-American War, but we go to having a massive global footprint. And of course, the 17 most powerful military before World War II to clearly the number one. And of course, you kind of wrap your mind around this and think about this kind of stuff. Think about that. We not only had the largest military on planet Earth at this moment, but also we had a technological weapon advantage unlike anything ever seen before in all of world history, right? Think about the atomic bomb that we had. Nobody else had it. And imagine, if you would, any other empire that we have ever learned about in all of world history. Think about them having a weapon like that is so technologically advanced, and there's no answer for that thing. Imagine any other empire we have ever looked at before in all of world history having that kind of advantage, and imagine them not using it, like the United States does not use it, right? So it's a mind-boggling thing to even imagine, right? We use that weapon, right, when the war is going on, and then when the war is done, we use it to not fight wars, right? It's a mind-boggling thing to think about, right? When you kind of think about all of world history and the restraint that was shown by the United States. Okay. All right. Anyway, we also get out of this a global order, right? Is being restructured. Obviously, the failings of the continental system and are present. We do see 1941 the Atlantic Charter. Roosevelt's opposition to European colonialism is well known and generally accepted. We've already mentioned this when we were talking about Ho Chi Minh. And Roosevelt insists in 1941 that the Atlantic Charter contained the following provisions: the rights of all people to choose their form of government in which they live. FDR wants the United States on the side of anti-colonialism. However, Truman's going to be in office when the war ends, and that is not always going to be the case. Obviously, in the case of Ho Chi Minh and French Indochina, it will not. However, there are going to be some cases where Truman does live up to this kind of desire of Roosevelt's. Most notably will be in Dutch Indonesia. Okay, and we're going to see a shift in the world order ruled by colonial powers to a world of nations. So the world after World War II, even with the countries that hold on to their colonies, they are eventually going to spin off by the time we get through the 1960s. Only a couple will remain in the 70s, and by the time we get out of the 70s, those colonies are done. All right, so we're going to see the number of sovereign countries go from 50 to 192 by the time we get to the year 2000. Right, and European powers like Great Britain, they will attempt to maintain some global relevance, in the kind of bipolar world that existed, in the aftermath of World War II. So we will see kind of an increase focus on the Commonwealth, right, as well to kind of maintain some kind of parity. All right, so but we will get into that in future discussions. That is all for today. Sapriati.